Welcome back. Many hoping to promote clean sources of electric energy generation has been pushing for wind turbines off the Maryland coast since 2011. Now major legislation is being debated in the General Assembly, which promises to generate 8.5 gigawatts of electricity by 2031, enough to power 1.3 million homes. We only have 7 million people living in Maryland. That's a pretty big deal if that comes about. Mark, according to the Able Foundation, however, it will cost approximately $75 per megawatt and as much as $8.7 billion to build the wind energy infrastructure. Estimates vary, but conservatively, it takes 15 to 20 years for wind energy to pay for itself. So is this a good investment?
Well, the big challenge, I mean, certainly appropriate where wind economics works well, but one of the challenges is because it's an intermittent supply, you need to also have this backup infrastructure that when wind isn't available, that there's continued electric supply. So you end up having sort of dual production capacity, which is more expensive because precisely, but arguably something in the order of, twice as much infrastructure or production capacity is available. That's very, very expensive to do that. And I think one of the challenges, if I could, is that in dealing with climate issues, we have those who have been advocating have not been as forthright as they could or should be about what precisely the costs are. There's been a tendency to push it off to regulators or push it off to subsidies or avoid it or to not take direct responsibility. And I think it does a real disservice not to be more clear about what the challenges are and specifically what the costs are going to be.
So, Mike, I've got no quarrel with wind energy development. I mean, as we were talking about with transportation earlier, an all of the above approach to electric generation is my belief. But I do complain when taxpayers are being asked to pay for it. And if wind energy is beneficial as it proposes, why not let the industry pay for it? Why do we need the subsidies for it?
Well, I mean, we've been subsidizing the energy market for a long time. I mean, we've been subsidizing ethanol. We've been doing, so we've subsidized a variety of energy production sources. And so I think if the intent is to move from what we've done from a fossil fuel perspective to be able to move to a more renewable set of energy sources, I think it's going to cost us money. I think that historically we've invested in petroleum production. I think we recognize we want to move from that. If there's a good public policy reason to be there, I think it's worthwhile to say that infrastructure is going to cost us money and we need to make investments to get there. And so I'm not as concerned about that as long as those pieces make sense. I think Mark raises a good point that if you're going to then do that, you've got to make sure we're talking about the right numbers so we actually know what that investment looks like. But it's going to take time for that return on investment to occur. But candidly, it always takes time for return on investment to occur. And so is it 10 years? Is it 12 years? Is it 8 years? I think it's important to know what that is. But I think that from the policy objectives we're trying to achieve, I don't think it's a problem for us to make that investment as a state, local, or federal government.
So, it was interesting that the state of Georgia just announced that they are going to open up one of these smaller nuclear facilities, which may be the wave of the future. I wonder if something like that would ever pass the Maryland General Assembly. There's a lot of misconceptions and aversions to nuclear energy floating around out there. And if the Georgia plant is successful, it may be a harbinger as to a new direction that we take.
No, I agree. I listened to the report the other day on the opening of that plan and what they're hoping to generate with it. I was actually a little surprised because it is smaller, that it doesn't have generate as much energy capacity as I would have anticipated. But I mean, candidly, when you go back and you look at the challenges with nuclear, obviously waste continues to be an issue and we've got to figure out how to address that. But the one everyone always gets concerned about are when there are problems. And obviously, when there are problems, and there have been 3 or 4 internationally that have been very visible, but they happen very, very, very infrequently. And so, I mean, I think to your point, if we're going to talk about an everything and strategy, I think we kind of have to put that in the mix and at least make sure we're having real conversations about it.
And Mark, New Jersey wants to do 25 windmills, and they're up in arms about the whales being killed. Any problem here?
Well, You know, there are trade-offs with just about every form of energy production, and that's a conversation that unfortunately we kind of need to have. We've backed into some choices already, but going forward, that's, you know, there's also some benefit from having energy as we have as a society move forward because we've been electrified.
Well, there's a lot of reports that question whether or not the whales are actually being,
and that is as well. I mean, I think I want to acknowledge the fact that there are environmental trade-offs also with windmills, with birds. I mean, it isn't just
Right.
whales. But again, I think we need to be kind of forthright about what choices we're making and what the consequences there are. And sometimes there's a tendency to avoid that.
The other piece on that, though, I think is I've read other reports where it says it's the increase in shipping, that you're seeing the migration of whales and the increase in the shipping lanes because we have so much more production now as a result of COVID and so much more being shipped out, that's where you're seeing the bigger impact in the whale population. And that's obviously not energy production. That's a whole consumption issue that we've got to begin to address.